Good afternoon. It's 1:30. We have a quorum. Let's call the meeting to order. Cindy? We're up to minutes. Everybody look at the minutes. Ready for a motion on the minutes?
Motion to approve the minutes from the December 7th, 2023 meeting.
Okay, got a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Cast your votes.
Aye.
All right, minutes received. Next, continuances. Cindy, what do you have?
We have item number 11, case number 15490, deferred till January 18th, 2024.
Is there anybody here on that one? Do we have a motion?
Motion to defer item number 15490 until January 18th.
Second.
In a second, cast your votes. All right, that one's continued. Are there any requests for continuance from the public? Does anybody have one they need to move? Okay. No consent dockets. Cindy, if you'll call the first one, please.
We have item number 1, case number 15501, request of GNS Sign Services on behalf of Oklahoma Healthcare Realty Corporation for variance to sign regulations located at 3300 Northwest Expressway.
Hello, my name is Cameron Gleason. I am with GNS Sign Services located at 1634 Southeast 23rd Street, Oklahoma. In short, in the nature of this request is for a hospital who's zoned residential 4, and with the allowance of only one ground sign or one wall sign at a maximum of 100 square feet. We do not believe this is adequate enough signage for the hospital. To explain the package, we have 2 signs that are going to be on the northeast side of the new building of the Heart Hospital, and then 2 signs that are on the south side of the Heart Hospital that will be identifying the 2 entrances, while the 2 signs in the northeast will be identifying the hospital itself. We believe that the signage that we proposed is large enough, and the minimum requirement that we believe is necessary to be able to navigate to the hospital safely with the 8-lane divided Northwest Expressway traffic. And with that, I am open to any questions that you might have.
Okay. Questions, comments from the board? Okay, wait a minute. Okay, this is you, Mr. Geese.
Yes. Yeah,
Okay,
that's me,
never mind.
yeah.
I don't have anybody else signed up to speak on this one. Does anybody want to address the board on this application? All right, if there's nothing else from the board, I think we're ready for a motion.
Motion to approve case number 15501 for the purpose that it meets the statutory requirements for the requested variance.
I second.
A motion and a second. Cast your votes. Okay, you're approved.
Thank you.
Item number 2, case number 15505, request of Orbit Homes and Construction for a variance to the front yard setback located at 2008 Northeast 14th Street.
Hello, I'm Johnny Maciel, Orbit Homes, in construction, 2916 Kyle Court.
Tell us about your application, please.
I had to apply for the variance. This is my first time ever doing one. It was brought to my attention. I submitted all the documents to the city. Everything was approved. House built, went through all the proper inspections, approved, got the certificate of occupancy. Went to sell the home, and when during the survey for the mortgage company, we found that we had an encroachment. And then I had to go through the necessary steps of applying for this, not just this one, but also built one next to.
How was this measured so that you have a 10-foot encroachment?
Well, when I called the city and I asked them where do I build line, and the instructions were a little bit unclear, and we did have a survey done. I don't have a way of explaining that, but it was told to me to measure from the street and go from there and then measure 25 feet back from there. Well, I did that, and obviously that didn't work. So, long story short, I come to discover that actually that build line is actually from the actual property line on the survey. I've built several houses before, and I usually line them up with the houses that are next door. And in this case, there was no houses next door, and it's a mistake.
Questions, comments from the board? And I don't have anybody signed it. Did you want to ask a question?
Even the houses to the east, it lines up with them,
The houses to the east,
yeah, further.
there's an empty lot to the east of one. Yeah.
And then further down the street.
Yeah, it sits a little bit in front of those.
Yeah.
And if you look at the one across the street, it actually looks like it's about 25 feet from the actual curb itself. So,
Yeah. But it doesn't look out of place. Either of those
no,
houses
no,
do
no,
not look
it
out
looks
of
really
place.
good.
I don't have anybody signed up to speak on this one. Does anybody want to address the board on this application? All right, nothing else from the board. I think we're ready for a motion.
Motion to approve case number 15505 for the purposes that it meets the statutory requirements for the requested variance.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. This one's approved.
Thank you.
Item number 3, case number 15506, a request of Orbit Homes and Construction for a variance to the front yard setback in the R1 Single Family located at 2012 Northeast 14th Street.
Me again.
I assume the information is the same as what, okay. Well, you're welcome to repeat it if you want, but you don't have to. Are there any other questions, comments from the board?
Quick comment. Are you planning on building other homes in this addition as well?
Yes, I'm actually building one on the east lot, in the east end of the corner. I lined it up with the houses, and it's in the proper space. So, unfortunately, those I did, and these I started a little later on. I built in that neighborhood as well.
And they are properly aligned?
They are properly, yes, ma'am.
Okay.
There's another one that I'm actually in the process with the owner to do, and this problem won't happen again, but we have an encroachment issue on that, but it's not in this neighborhood.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Anything else from the board? And I don't have anybody signed up to speak on this one. Does anybody want to address the board on this application? All right, I guess we're ready for a motion.
Motion to approve case number 15506 for the purposes that it meets the statutory requirements for the requested variance.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. All right, you're approved again.
Item number 4, case number 15500, request of Williams Box Forsham Bullard on behalf of LNP 9400 Broadway Extension LLC for a variance to the temporary moratorium on the acceptance of new applications to allow construction of freestanding signs for a proposed PUD location located at 9400 Broadway Extension.
Good afternoon, David Box, 522 Colcord Drive, here on behalf of the applicant. This is a bit of a unique application in that we're not asking you for a specific size. You may recall I had a similar application for the half development that is just out of the picture to the south. It would be on Wilshire. What we're asking for is a variance to the moratorium to allow our PUD to move forward and allow the size of the sign, the placement of the sign, and all of those things to be determined through the legislative process, through Planning Commission with Mr. Noble and his associates, and ultimately City Council. When you think of a large-scale redevelopment like we propose here at the corner of Broadway Extension in Britain, 200 square feet for signage, when you could have so many tenants, so many buildings, and a really meaningful, intense development, simply does not allow for that type of development to move forward when you're thinking about leasing it to tenants, et cetera. So what we're asking to do is to vary the moratorium. Again, that doesn't decide the size of it. Ultimately, the Planning Commission, City Council will decide it, but without the variance, we can't move forward with that piece of the process. So much like we did on the development called the half, we're asking for a similar accommodation here to move forward in the legislative process. Happy to answer any questions.
Anything from the board on this one?
So the type of sign and the size of the sign will be brought to the Planning Commission,
Yep, it's a PUD,
Determined.
and so all of that will be, you know,
written in the PUD.
yeah, in fact, I think it's this time next Thursday we can argue about it.
So this is just a variance in order to get the PUD to advance.
Is it not next week?
Anything else from the board? And nobody signed up on this one. Does anybody want to address the board on this application? Okay, guess we're ready for a motion.
Motion to approve case number 15500 for the purpose that it meets the statutory requirements for the requested variance. My word.
Second.
Okay, motion and a second, cast your votes. You're approved.
Thank you.
Item number 5, case number 15502, request of Johnson & Associates on behalf of Med Park Real Estate for a variance to building-facade and architectural regulations in PUD 280, located at 6200 North Martin Luther King Avenue.
Good afternoon, Mark Zitzow with Johnson & Associates on behalf of the applicant. Before you is a project that you saw at your last meeting. We talked about driveways at that meeting. Since then, in reviewing the PUD, there was another item that required a variance, which was a limitation on the use of a metal facade. That's also found in the overlay district for this portion of town. So before you is this request to allow for the metal to be used on this project. There's the site plan before you. There's a series of buildings that will be constructed all using an architectural metal. For many of you, you may recall an application about 12 months ago where we sought the use of metal for a storage facility a little further up I-35. There was discrepancy in the code and in the current materials that are used as to what is uncoated metal and untreated metal. Currently, this is not the metal that the code envisioned back in the 70s and 80s when it was drafted. When you go around town, you see this blue metal. It's not been maintained. It's not worn well, particularly in this weather and this climate. So since then, technologies have changed significantly, as are the coatings that are applied to these metal buildings, which is why you've seen so much of it used recently around town. You've seen it on Red Solo Pup in the Chisholm Creek development, and Andretti's at the Half project that you David just mentioned, is also using it, as did the Bar K on the river, which is in a design review district. So the use of metal buildings has become more prominent and has been accepted throughout the city, including in design review districts. And so what we're asking for is to permit the construction of these buildings. You can see the renderings on the screen. One of the key reasons why we have chosen this material is the goal is that this project will be very popular and very successful. The use of metal allows for expansion without disruption to the project. It's one of the benefits of using this type of product and material. And so with that, happy to answer any questions. We do have a letter of support in there from the Adventure District. We've spoken with other neighbors that are supportive of it. And so with that, happy to answer any questions, but we would ask for your approval today.
Any questions or comments from the board? I don't have anybody signed up on this one. Does anybody wants to address the board on this application? All right. Guess we're ready for a motion then.
Motion to approve case number 15502 for the purposes that it meets the statutory requirements for the requested variance.
Our second.
Okay, a motion and a second. Cast your votes. You're approved.
Thank you.
Item number 6, case number 15499, is an application for special exception to allow home sharing for Felicia Pringle Durant located at 6001 Glen Clove Place.
I'm appearing here for Felicia Durant.
Give
My
us
name
your
is Joey
name
Keck.
and give us your address, please. For the
Address is 5629 North Classen. The address of the subject property here, pull that back up, is 6001 Glen Cove Place, Oklahoma City, 73132.
All right. Tell us a little bit about your application and the game plan.
The application is for Airbnb. She has applied for the Airbnb. I've got the rules here, the quiet hours, open for any questions that you guys may have on the subject property.
Questions or comments from the board?
Was there any protests on this?
I don't have anybody signed up to speak. Does anybody want to address the board on this application? Okay.
Let's just make some adjustments to the application then. You said you had the rules for quiet hours. What were they?
Yeah, quiet hours are 11 p.m. to 7 a.m.
Okay, I'd like to make an addition to a maximum of 4 cars
Okay.
and then a 1-year exception.
I'm going to modify the quiet hours to 10 p.m. to 7 a.m.
Say again.
10 p.m. to 7 a.m. for the
Okay.
quiet hours.
Okay. So you said 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. and then what, you mentioned something a minute ago. I'd
4-car maximum in the driveway.
4-car maximum, and then you said one other thing.
Oh, the exception would just be for 1 year.
Oh, 1 year. Okay.
I think the application says 12 months. Okay.
I'd rather give him a year. I think we're ready for a motion.
All right. Motion to approve case number 15499 for the purposes that it meets the statutory requirements for the requested exceptions, subject to the rules and self-imposed rules in the application with the following modifications. Maximum number of cars shall be 4. Quiet hours are adjusted to be 10 p.m. to 7 a.m., and this shall be for a term of 1 year.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Cast your votes.
Thank
You're
you.
approved.
Item number 7, case number 15503, is a renewal application for Nathan Cruz to allow home sharing located at 13128 Green Valley Drive.
Hello, I'm Nathan Henderson I'm here on behalf of Nathan Cruz, just looking to seek renewal.
I noticed you're asking for 10 people. This says 3-bed, 2-bath. How are you going to get 10 people in?
I think he put it for both sides. It's
Oh,
another
okay,
case.
all right.
Yeah.
All right.
And this is a renewal. I do remember when they came, and there was a lot of protests on the original. And so you must have been operating
Oh, very well. Yeah.
pretty good. And I think originally, if I remember correctly, it was 10 occupants per duplex.
Oh, wow.
But do you know that it's set up for that?
Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, counting 2 beds, 2, 4, 6, and then 1, 2. I would say it's set up for at the most 8.
Okay, we can adjust the application for that.
So there's 3 bedrooms, 2 people each. Is there a additional bed somewhere?
Yeah, it's 2 additional futons that lay back.
So the original application was approved at 10 guests the first time?
Yes, this is my first year under doing his property, but last year he did say it was 10.
Anything else from the board? Questions, comments?
It's got a really big driveway, but I still would like to maximum number of cars to be 5.
Okay. And since then, we've also put no parking signs at that curb next to the mailbox. It's a long curb right there.
I happen to go by here a lot, so
Perfect.
I see this.
It's operated for a year. Has it been rented out for up to 8 people
Yes, it has.
during that time? Okay.
Okay, I didn't see any protests. The only one signed up to speak is Nathan Henderson.
That's me.
Does anybody want to address the board on this application? Okay, I think we're ready for a motion.
This is a renewal, so I guess we will do it for a term of 3 years. Just to let you know. Motion to approve case number 15503 for the purposes that it meets the statutory requirements for the requested special exception, subject to the requested self-imposed guidelines in the application with the following modifications. Maximum number of 5 cars shall be for a term of 3 years, and the maximum number of guests shall be reduced from 10 to 8.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Approved.
Item number 8, case number 15504 is a renewal of special exception of Nathan Cruz to allow home sharing at 4045 Thunderbird Drive.
Same situation for
Same
this?
situation.
Okay. And you're still the only one signed up to speak?
Yes.
Anything from the board on this one?
Would like to make the same adjustments to the application.
5 cars.
5
and
cars,
8.
8-person maximum,
Okay.
and a 3-year exemption.
The other side has 2 extra futons, so that can accommodate 10.
Yeah, but we already did that to 8.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay, not a problem.
And anybody want to address the board on this application? Okay, we're ready for a motion.
Motion to approve case number 15504 for the purposes that it meets the statutory requirements for the requested special exception with the following modifications. This shall be for a term of 3 years. Maximum number of cars shall be 5, and the maximum number of guests shall be reduced from 10 to 8.
Second.
Motion and a second. Cast your vote.
Thank
You're
you.
approved.
Thank you.
Item number 9, case number 15496 is an application of Michael Duncan and Samantha Duncan to allow home sharing at 1811 Northwest 18th Street.
Hello, Sammy Duncan, 1811 Northwest 18th.
Tell us a little bit about your application.
I'm sorry, what?
I said, tell us a little bit about your application.
I'm looking to use my previous home as an Airbnb.
And I noticed you have maximum number of guests, 8 with 3 bedrooms. How'd you get to 8?
Thinking about putting twin bunk beds in a room for kids, so that would be 4 kids, and then I have a king bed in the master and either a queen or a king in the second bedroom.
Questions, comments from the board?
Is this for the main house?
Yes,
And then there's a garage apartment behind it,
that's right.
but that's not included in this?
No, for the time being, I'm going to keep the garage apartment for my mother.
Okay. And the house is a 3-bedroom, 2-bath?
Yes. With the half bath downstairs.
So 2.5.
All right, we had a couple of protests. Did you see those?
I did, yes.
Did you have a chance to speak to any of those folks?
No.
Okay.
Is there anyone here on this one?
Nobody
No one
signed up to speak on this one. Does anybody
Okay.
want to address the board on this application?
So, seeing this is the first time this has been up for this permit, a 1-year exception is what we usually have done.
Okay.
I want to limit the cars to 4.
Okay.
No off-street parking, all in the driveway.
Anything else from the board?
Is the room that you're going to have 4 beds in, how big is that room?
I think it's a good sized room. I think you could fit a queen easily. When I measured it for a king, it would feel a little tight for a king bed if you put a dresser and nightstands. So I think it would fit either, the twin bunks or a queen. But they're all nice sized bedrooms upstairs. I had used it for one of my kids previously.
When you say bunk, are you talking about doing a queen bunk? Like a queen
No,
bunk
probably
bed?
just little bitty twin ones.
Okay.
Or else there wouldn't be enough room, in between for your nightstands and dressers and that kind of thing.
Okay. Anyone want to address the board on this one? Okay, if there's nothing else from the board, I think we're ready for a motion.
Motion to approve case number 15496 for the purposes that it meets the statutory requirements for the special exceptions with the following modifications. This shall be for a term of 1 year. Maximum number of cars shall be 4. No on-street parking. And I think that's it.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Cast your votes. You're approved.
Thank you.
Item number 10, case number 15, is an appeal of Richard Dowell on the decision of an administrative official regarding the interpretation of a use unit, excuse me, 8250.4, community recreation restricted.
Okay, can everybody hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay, I'm Rick Dowell. I'm president of Dowell Properties. Our company owns a number of properties downtown, some of which are involved in the current dispute. Also, I was the past president of the Park Plaza District Association, which is a district that existed for many years between the Central Business District and the Midtown District. And we were absorbed into the Central Business District about 4 years ago. So anyway, I do have some familiarity and I'm quite familiar with the nature of businesses and kind of what they want and what their problems are. So I'm here, if there's going to be 3 of us here today, I'm going to give you just a general overview of who's going to be speaking and what the subject for discussion is and kind of what the problem is and what we hope you can do for us. And Paul Pendley will be giving you a history of kind of how we got to where we are. And then Mike Berryman will present the audio disc that shows the basis upon which, or at least a large part of the evidence in which decisions have been made by other boards regarding this matter. Okay, so first of all, let's define the problem. I've always been told that when you deal with officials working for the government or people such as yourself, I have to define the problem and then tell you what I expect you to do about it. That's, you know, within the legal framework of what you can do. So let's define the problem. Okay, the problem in short is that we have an individual that Mr. Box is representing that rented a building on 5th Street and in between, if you guys have looked at the map, I think it's in between Walker and Hudson. And it had been an office building previously, and so the owner rented it to some people. I think it's called the Dog Park. And they set up something that was in line with zoning 8300.11, which is operating a boarding house for dogs or a veterinary clinic, so forth, but that the activity is carried on exclusively indoors, not outdoors. However, much to our chagrin, when they started construction and one of our people next door noticed what they were doing and that they were going to have an outdoor dog park, he pointed out to them that that isn't legal under the zoning that you have to operate with in nature of the business that you have. And so at that point, a kerfuffle started of sorts. And Mr. Box Sr., not the current Mr. Box, but I guess it was his father, represented, it turns out the city could not issue a permit to have an outdoor dog, for them to do what they were doing without changing the zoning. So Mr. Box Sr. then helped the individuals start applying for a change in zoning. And anyway, it was obvious from Mr. Box Sr. that they weren't getting anywhere with the Planning Commission, that there was no way this was probably going to be approved, and they just dropped the thing. So the rest of us thought, well, I guess it's done. The people will keep the dogs indoors and we won't have a problem. Well, it turned out that the city ignored the fact that they were not obeying the zoning requirements of the zoning ordinance of which they were supposed to be operating in. And the dogs kept barking, and we thought, what the heck's going on? So we started complaining to the city. Well, why don't you do something about this? We complained, they never did anything, and finally we had enough, and the city was forced, this was 3 years after the fact, to issue a citation to the dog park that they were operating illegally. So again, we went through a rezoning thing. This time there were actual votes taken. So it turns out that I think it's 62%, I can't remember the exact percentage here, I had it on some notes, but basically it's about 70% of the people in the surrounding area, the properties in the surrounding areas defined by the area when you go to get something rezoned, were opposed to the thing because the dogs were making all kinds of racket and driving people crazy and reducing property values because it was hard to lease anything. And so the thing started again, went to the Downtown Design Review. They voted 6-0 to not recommend that use in that particular location. Then it went to the Planning Commission, which again voted 6-0 that it shouldn't be, that it was incompatible with that area. Now, then and at that point, it was going to the City Council. The meeting with the City Council was delayed by Mr. Box Jr. Once, and then the second time he just dropped the case. So we thought, well, we're done. But the dogs were still barking. So we thought, what is going on? And then I found out, much to my chagrin, that the city staff had somehow led Mr. Box to believe that they could just continue as they had been legally under a different zoning thing, which is, I think, well, Paul can mention the specific, he's going to be talking about that. But there's a zoning thing, I think it's 8250-4.4 that allows for general recreation stuff. For example, you can have a public basketball court, a public tennis court, and things like that, and that's a use that's authorized under the DBD zoning. So the idea was, well, could they put a dog park under that? And evidently the city staff thought, yes, they could. But one thing I should mention is if you read that part of the in other words, if you read 850.4, it doesn't mention dog parks, public, private, or any dog parks at all in there. So it's rather arbitrary for a city to make a decision that there is a zoning place that it can go that is permitted. So obviously, it's not necessarily, I mean, most of the time when we pass ordinances, and I help draft the ordinance that the Downtown Design Review works with, because I've been on the Urban Design Commission for 8 years, and I know that it's very difficult to design an ordinance to cover every possibility that happens. And so you come to a time that somebody or some organization is going to have to amend it. The most difficult thing to do is to have it go back to the city council and change it, but we have shortcuts when it creates a problem that you can avoid that. And so one of them is the city can just make a decision and say, look, our interpretation is X. This is what you can do or what you can't do. And then if some other party, which in this case us, don't like the decision the city make, we can go to the Board of Adjustment. You guys have a right to amend what the city had to say. So what we're saying is that somehow implicitly the city decision should have been, and the note that should have been given to Mr. Box was, in this particular location, even though we have said that you can, that, you know, a dog park, public dog parks could conceivably be in 850.4, which would be allowed under DBD zoning. In your particular case, the answer is no. And the reason is, when it mentions in that particular 850.4, it says that it must serve the surrounding area. It must serve the surrounding area, and that it must be a public dog park. And so, of course, our argument is, well, first of all, how can it be serving the surrounding area if two groups of commissioners, 12 in total, appointed by our elected officials, have unanimously said that it is totally incompatible with that area to have dogs of any sort outdoors because it's surrounded by office space. It's got an apartment building right next to it, who, by the way, was one of the protesters. So basically, what the city, in our view, should have said because Mr. Box obviously has misinterpreted it, because if you look at the letter that he sent, he feels like they can proceed with exactly the business they're currently operating, based on what the city's told them. And then when I visited city staff, I found out that, well, they'd already started a permit under the Downtown Design Review, and Downtown Design Review has absolutely no prerogative whatsoever with regard to use, which means they can only consider, is there anything you're doing with the building, like the size of the fence, that's incompatible in design with the surrounding area? Well, obviously, I would think you could put a fence up that's going to keep Downtown Design Review happy. Then the next thing you'd have to do is get a fence permit. They're not going to be authorized to ask the question about use. That's already been litigated through the Planning Commission and through the Downtown Design Review, that no, this isn't a place to do it. So in our view, what the city should have done is said, yes, we think that a dog park that's public can be authorized, but not where you are, because it's not serving the public interest. Now we come, so that's our problem. Now you're going to see why it is that these people, these 12 commissioners, voted unanimously that this is not a place to have dogs outdoors. And you're going to hear a tape and you'll see why. Surrounding the area surrounding the protesters, if you look at this, and you should have this in your packet, what this is it's from the county assessor that assesses the value of all of the buildings, as we know downtown. It gives you their appraised value. The appraised value of the buildings that have protested what's going on here is $20 million. In my view, I used to be a professor of economics, the deleterious effect that this dog parking has had on leasing has probably reduced the value of those buildings by at least 30%. That's a loss of $6 million. Now, we have a deal here, and that is that the problem with the dog park could be easily solved, as I've mentioned, by just enclosing the dog park. I'm a general contractor. I could probably enclose the thing for $50,000, and they wouldn't even need to change the zoning, or we wouldn't be here. Or alternatively, you could just walk the dog. So there's an easy solution to the problem in terms of the applicant that Mr. Box is representing. However, in our case, unless this is rectified, we've got an insoluble problem and loss. Now we come to what we're asking you to do and what I think legally you can do. I think you should reiterate the pronouncement that in this particular example, for this particular location, this is not a place that we should have either a public or a private dog park. Because that's already been litigated. And that doesn't mean that someone could start one somewhere else in the area that doesn't have these problems, that there's no protest. For example, we do have a dog park that is operating under this 850.4, and it's had no complaints that I'm aware of. So there's no problem. So it's not that you're ruling out the possibility that somewhere in the central business district you can engage in this kind of activity. It's just not in that particular spot. Now, let's go to, and by the way, I'm not a lawyer, and I'm doing this pro bono for everybody in the area, so forgive me if my legal speak isn't perfect. So what I did is I just looked at the ordinance that governs your prerogatives. And I saw something that really got my attention here. And I don't know if you can see, I don't know what paragraph this is, and this is right out of the city ordinance. And it says that the board shall specify the reason for granting or denying an appeal, considering all appeals from rulings made under this chapter, blah, blah, but I'll get to it. It says, to determine the effect of the proposed change to public streets upon the public safety from fire and other hazards, upon and relating to public health, safety, comfort, convenience, order, and the general welfare of the people of the city. And it also mentions the effect on adjacent property values. So therefore, I think that you do have the prerogative to make a statement here that finally, after 3.5 years, puts this thing to rest. So I guess the next person I'm going to have is Paul Pendley, unless you have any questions of me specifically regarding this matter, because I will come back as a summary at the end. But if you've got any questions right now, or I've made something that maybe isn't clear, just I'm all ears here.
Questions, comments from the board? Okay.
Okay.
You want Paul Pendley next?
Pardon?
You want Paul Pendley next?
Yes, Paul.
Afternoon. My name is Paul Pendley, I live at 1200 Northwest 85th. And I want to talk about why we are here today. And I'm going to do that by giving you some background, some of which Mr. Dowell already went over, but I'm going to do this in order. On March 12th, 2020, Mr. Box's client applied for a building permit with the proposed use of a dog kennel. The plan submitted with that application had no indication of an outdoor play, kennel, dog run area. The plans for that, by the way, are in the packet. Code Review approved those plans requiring, quote, remodel as per approved plans, and permit BLDC 2020-01619 was granted on May 6, 2020 with the use code Animal Sales and Services, Kennel and Veterinary Restricted. That code is defined as providing kennel and vet services within a enclosed building. On July 16th, Mr. Box's client applied for a rezoning, SPUD 1244, to allow outdoor dog runs currently prohibited by zoning within the downtown business district. On October 11th, they submitted a fence drawing to the DDRC without an application for review and approval. You can see that in the DDRC file DTCA 20-00073. That fence was never approved. On October 20th, 2020, during the DDRC meeting held by Zoom due to COVID restrictions, I'm sure you all remember that, heard SPUD 1244 application. There was vehement and overwhelming opposition to the rezoning by the neighbors of 415 Northwest 5th, which is the subject property. And the DDRC voted 3-1 to recommend the Planning Commission hear those comments made by the protesters at their next meeting. Mr. Box delayed that scheduled Planning Commission meeting twice before withdrawing their application on September 20th, 2020. On September 25th, 5 days after, they submitted, a supplemental building permit was issued, that's BLDC 2020-06567, with the same land use code, no outdoor dog runs allowed. The altered building plans, again, showed no indication there would be any structure, enclosure, fenced area, or otherwise that would show an outdoor dog area. 2 days later, a fence contractor applied for but did not complete review, and thus was never issued a fence permit, yet a stockade fence was installed nonetheless. On the 16th of October, 2020, certificate of occupancy with the same use code, strictly for indoor operations, was issued. And then for the next 3 years, the surrounding neighbors have made numerous calls, complaints about incessant dog barking. On the 10th of March 2023, the city finally issued a citation. In an effort to stay that violation, Mr. Box applied for a new SPUD, SPUD 1535. And at the July 20th, 2023 DDRC meeting, they again heard overwhelming opposition to SPUD 1535, and the DDRC voted unanimously not to forward a recommendation for approval to the Planning Commission. At the subsequent Planning Commission meeting, all these facts that I have recited, all of which are public record, all of this timeline was presented, along with the opposition of the neighbors, and again, by unanimous vote, the Planning Commission voted against the SPUD, citing, quote, incompatibility with the neighborhood. SPUD 1535 was introduced at City Council hearing set for September 12th of this year. After a continuance, it was withdrawn by Mr. Box, citing, quote, upon further review, it has been determined that a dog park is permitted under use unit 598250.4, community restricted. Those are the facts, that's the timeline, that's all public record. Now, at every step of this process, Mr. Box has claimed that the city made a mistake. Through some method, tacit or otherwise, they told his client that they could have outdoor dog facilities within the DBD zoning. He has intimated at every meeting that there is a potential liability on the part of the city because of this. Yet in every meeting, I have not seen one piece of evidence supporting that grievance. Evidence entered into the record at DDRC, Planning Commission, as well as here, this very board, has contradicted that claim. The initial building permit shows no outdoor dog play area. If you have been given permission to build something, why don't you have it in your building plans? Why is it not on your supplemental building plans? In Mr. Box's December 29th letter to this board, he claims they applied for a SPUD first, but withdrew because the building permit 2020-01619 was issued, which rendered the rezoning application unnecessary. That is backwards and false. They submitted plans which were in compliance with zoning, and the use permitted by BLDC 2020-01619. But once they got their certificate of occupancy, they erected an illegal fence, they put down turf over the blacktop parking lot, and proceeded to operate illegally in defiance of the law. And for 3 years, the surrounding stakeholders have endured and begged for relief. We thought this issue would be decided once and for all before the City Council. However, Mr. Box has decided to exploit the vague language of 59-8250.4 of the Municipal Code covering community recreation restricted to try and turn a private, for-profit dog kennel into a public dog park. So why are we here? We're here because of this. On October 31st, 2023, Planning Department staff received a verbal inquiry from David Box and Caitlin Turner of Williams Box, Forshee, and Bullard PC regarding which use classification a public dog park would be, and a request for the history on Midtown Mutts at 409 West Park Place. On September 21st, 2023, staff responded to the inquiry via email stating that use unit 59-8250.4 Community Recreation Restricted could be applied to a public dog park. Staff also confirmed that use unit 8250.4 is permitted in the downtown business district. And I want to emphasize this next point from staff's response to Mr. Box. Subject to the use unit standards and all other applicable requirements and restrictions provided for in the municipal code, and that there may be other licenses and permits required to legally establish the proposed use. And of course, a certificate of approval from DDRC is required for any exterior changes to the building. Yet, Mr. Box, in his own words, in his own supporting letter to this board that is in your packet, says this: the Oklahoma City Planning, Legal, and Development Services Department have reviewed and analyzed the subject property and its corresponding use on numerous occasions and in great detail. It is the opinion of the city's professional staff that the use operating at 415 Northwest 5th Street is one that is permitted by right under 59-8250.4 Community Recreation Restricted, and that this is the same use unit that permits other outdoor dog facilities within the downtown business district, and one that is applicable in this instance to allow continued operations of this necessary establishment. That is a direct contradiction of the letter Sarah Welch sent to Mr. Box. He asked a generic question: under what use unit does a dog park belong? And she sent a generic response: community recreation restricted. At no point did staff adjust, quote, subject property and its corresponding use. And they did not say it is applicable to continued operations. Those operations are illegal. They are not permitted for that. They do not have an occupancy permit for that. They do not have a spud. They have an illegal fence. They don't even have grass. They are a private business trying to skirt the letter and the spirit of the law through misinterpreting and misusing city staff's words, and they have misrepresented the events leading to this point. This board must put an end to this. Revise your advice to Mr. Box. Instruct him that they cannot continue to break the law. Inform him that they are not and have never been a public dog park. And saying that they are now does not change almost 4 years of damages, wasted time, energy to the surrounding neighborhood. I thank you for your time, and I welcome any questions you may have.
Questions or comments from the board? I've got a couple other people signed up to
Thanks.
speak. Kelly Wark, I see. You want to address? Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, yes, my name is Kelly Work, and with your permission, I would request to speak following the other speakers that you have listed to speak on this matter.
Okay. Mr. Dowell, do you have anybody else you want to? Okay. Okay, you'll have to step up to the microphone so make a record.
We sent a copy of the tape and the video. If you could play that, because I know Mr. Beverly will want you to hear that, because that is really the evidence we presented to both the Planning Commission and to the Downtown Design Review. I'm not sure if someone here on the staff knows how to load that thing on your screen.
I don't.
Well, I sent
I
it over.
bet so.
Well, is it over here somewhere? Because I sent it over here. It was one of our attachments. It's a video little thing. It's only about 3 or 4 minutes. Yeah.
Yes. I got here a little bit late. Here's my request to be heard, but my name is Mike Berryman. My address is 426 Northwest 5th Street, which puts me immediately across the street south from the subject property. And so I won't rehash anything that's been said here already, but I am probably one of the most familiar with what goes on day to day at the subject site. I just want to, I've had the building that I'm in now for 26 years. We bought it when Oklahoma City was kind of coming back from the bombing, and so I'm really proud to be a part of our city and its rebound over the last 25 years. But just being there day to day with the issue at hand, the barking dogs and so forth over the last 3 years has been very problematic. And, you know, without rehashing everything that's been said, which I'm very familiar with the process and things that we've been through because we've all been here through all of those DDRC hearings, all the Planning Commission, usually our protesters are here in mass. But what I did to kind of frame the issue is just got up on my building from time to time with a simple camera that, you know, you can buy at Target to videotape what goes on across the street on a daily basis, and then had that tape edited down, just compressed it down just to 1.5 minutes so it wouldn't take up a lot of your time and bore you to death. But I just wanted you to see the kind of the magnitude with your own eyes of what the problem really is, and why we're so up in arms and have been for the last 3 years about trying to get something, you know, accomplished on this. I think that's it. The only thing I'd like to add is that there isn't anything enhanced about that video at all. Like, I just took it with a regular camera. The sound has not been enhanced. It's what you hear right across the street. So I'll stop there. Any questions I could answer for anyone?
Anything from the board? Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Mr. Dowell, do you have anybody else that you want to present or anything else before I call on Box?
Just a kind of in closing comment, I just want to say this, that basically what we have here, I hope that you can see, is that if we were starting over again with that ordinance, if we were doing everything knowing what we know now about this, when you have 12 appointed officials saying this isn't a good idea to put this thing there, something has run amok. Now the question is, when something run amok, is there any way with the process we have in place to deal with it? Because obviously this is creating a problem. This is something that shouldn't have happened. And so that's why I think you're our last stop here as to hitting things in the right direction. And I realize this is going to be hard for you, but I hope you can help us, okay?
Kelly, do you want to speak now or you want to be rebuttal?
I'd prefer to do rebuttal if I could.
Okay. Mr. Box, your turn.
Yeah, well, real quickly, David Box, 522 Colcord Drive. Kelly is here on behalf of the applicant. The normal course of things, all of those that are here on behalf of the applicant go. Surely Mr. Work knows that, as he's always here on the opposite side of me and goes second. So it would be highly unusual for Mr. Work to be able to bookend it. He's here on behalf of the applicant. They go first.
Mr. Box is incorrect. I'm not here on behalf of the applicant.
Okay,
The
you're,
application.
You-
I don't think it's on my side.
I'm not here on behalf of the application.
okay, yours just said you wanted to address the board.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
So
I'll
he's
let you.
not here in
your
support of the appeal, is what he just told the board. Let's recall that when he gets up here to speak.
Okay.
So, my name's David Box, 522 Colcord Drive. I represent the tenant that operates this facility. This has been a lengthy process. Unfortunately for Mr. Noble, this is, I think, now the second time he's had to endure this discussion. So this particular discussion is a very unique discussion. It is not a question of whether or not barking dogs are appropriate there. It's not a question of whether or not that use unit is appropriate there. What the applicant here has done, he has filed an application asking you to tell staff that their analysis of the code is wrong. The question as to whether or not the use is appropriate or barking dogs are appropriate here is one of zoning. If we did not possess the use unit necessary to have this operation, that is when you would argue about appropriateness of a use. That discussion doesn't happen within the confines of the Board of Adjustment. You guys hear appeals, special exceptions, variances. The Planning Commission and City Council is who hears appropriateness of uses. So let me clear one thing up in the letter that I think is perhaps causing some consternation on the staff level. When I referenced that the staff email from Ms. Welch on September 21st authorizes the current use, we understand that we have to modify the outdoor portion. A private facility, which is what it has been, is not allowed. A public dog park. So we will have to modify this, open it to the public. We understand also that there are perhaps permitting issues with fences and turf. Those things happen within the confines of a DDRC application. We have to get a CA. We understand that. When someone files an appeal like they've done here, it stays everything. Nothing can move forward, nothing can happen. The status quo is stayed until the pendency of this appeal. So, at the conclusion of this, hopefully you agree with staff and say that a public dog park is permitted under that use unit. Again, I don't even know that we're really talking about this specific site. What they're asking you to do is say that globally, a dog park, a public dog park, is not permitted under this use unit, regardless of this site. So if we look around downtown, there have been other applications of public dog parks. This is the use unit that historically the city has allowed to operate a public dog park in. If you look to the north, the Midtown, I think it's Midtown Mutts, which is just north of Fassler Hall, a public dog park. That's where our inquiry started. I kept asking the question, how does Midtown Mutts operate? How does Midtown Mutts operate? Because they're zoned in the same manner as my client's property is owned. They didn't seek any approvals before DDRC, Planning Commission, or City Council. The reason being a public dog park is permitted under the use unit listed in, what's in your staff report? The 8250.4. That is the use unit that the staff has historically placed a public dog park in. I didn't hear any evidence from any of the applicants as to why staff's analysis was wrong. They complained about the use, they complained about the process, they complained about how many times they've had to come here, but the reality is you are here sitting in an appeal in which you have to have evidence to say that staff's analysis is wrong. They didn't present you with any of that. The reality is they just don't like the use there. Perhaps I understand that. But the fact remains that the use unit is a permitted by right use on this piece of property. Permitted by right means something. It means you get to do whatever that use unit is, subject to getting appropriate permits and CAs or whatever it is in the downtown area. But no evidence was presented to you for you to say that globally, staff's interpretation of a public dog park being consistent with this use unit is wrong. That should end the analysis right there. They can complain all they want, but that's what they're asking you to do. You're not here on a rezoning application. You're not here to approve this use. They're asking you to invalidate staff's interpretation of the ordinance that has historically been applied to public dog parks. And again, we understand we're going to have to go get CAs for fences. We're going to have to go get CAs for turf. I'm not going to launch into the lengthy discussion that Mr. Noble's already heard as to why we're here. Mistakes were made on both sides, staff and my client. We had permits, we were told one thing, and things consistently changed. And finally, we got to the point where I asked that question as to what use unit is a public dog park. The response was 8250.4. If you look in the zoning code, 8250.4 is a permitted big P in the zoning table. What that means is my client, by law, is expressly permitted to operate all use units that fall under the 8250.4. Now, does it say dog park? No. Does the municipal code have an exhaustive list of all uses that exist? No. They are generic in nature. There would be no way to ever encapsulate every single use unit that might be needed. And so the municipal code is generic. We rely on professional staff to come up with their interpretation as to what this specific use is and where does it fit within the zoning code. Staff historically has said this use, a public dog park, is permitted under 8250.4. End of story. So we would ask you to deny the appeal because they provided you no evidence as to why staff's analysis is wrong. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions from the board? Comments from Mr. Box?
I guess my co-counsel, Mr. Work, is now going to speak to you.
Well, Mr. Dow? No, you got to step up to the microphone, please.
If it's okay with you, could I just briefly respond to what Mr. Box just said?
Go ahead.
Okay, first of all, let's just look at the situation about evidence. Okay, first of all, if you read 850-4.4, which we pointed out, it says it should be serving the public in the surrounding area. So the evidence, I think, is self-explanatory. It's not serving the public in the surrounding area when you have two commissions that said it clearly is not. So you do have evidence to say it's not fitting in that category because it's clearly not serving the public in that area. The next question is this a public facility that they're operating? The one that he mentions, and the only one I'm aware of operating in the downtown area, is the Mutt Park. And that thing is not a person's business. It's just a piece of land that someone wasn't using that said you can use as a dog park whenever you want to, so the public can just walk in there. You probably saw that these people are operating a business there. and you can see the number of dogs that are on that little plot of land. How in heaven's name could you call a private business operating there a public dog park? It's absurd. I don't know what Mr. Box must think we all have a very low IQ.
You want to respond?
Yeah, I don't have any inclination as to anyone's IQ in the room. But again, we have to make modifications to the way that the facility is currently oriented. We have to open it to the public. That's what we intend to do once the appeal is done and the stay is lifted. It may even mean that we have to close off the door that exists in the building that opens to the outdoor area. So it is a pure, open to the public dog park, no different than Midtown Mutts. It's not just a piece of land, it's a fenced-in area. If you're familiar with it, they have a fence. It's not just a big field where dogs just go everywhere. It's a fenced-in area that is a dog park. That's exactly what this will be, subject to approval by the DDRC of our fence. But it will be open to the public, not just used for the next door neighbor, which is the kennel.
Your turn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. My name is Kelly Work, and I am an attorney here representing Mike and Shauna Berryman, who own property located at 426 Northwest 5th Street. My law office address is 105 North Hudson, Suite 304. And as you all know, the jurisdiction of the Board of Adjustment includes variances and special exceptions, and then this third category, which you see far fewer of, which is appeals from determinations of the planning department officials or building officials. So the matter that is before you in connection with this particular appeal concerns that latter category. So this is an appeal from the determination of the planning department that was brought by Mr. Dowell, and that is the issue, of course, that is before you. And as the staff report notes, the planning department's interpretation in this matter was not intended to apply to a specific address. Again, the planning department's interpretation was not intended to apply to a specific address. They were asked the inquiry, what use unit under the city's zoning ordinances would a dog park fit into? That was the inquiry that was presented to the planning department. They responded after some thorough review to that inquiry, and they said, as set forth in the email that it was sent to Caitlin Turner and Mr. Box. Ms. Turner is Mr. Box's associate. And in that email, Ms. Welch, Planning Department Director, just responded to the inquiry and said that the use unit 59-8250.4, which is the Community Recreation Restricted Use Unit, could be applied to a public dog park. That was the only determination that was made by the planning department. Now, I think the reason why you're seeing this level of concern from the neighbors on this property at Northwest 5th Street is because the owner of the doghouse, the use there at 415 Northwest 5th Street, and their representative, Mr. Box, sought to mischaracterize that interpretation to have been one to say this use unit at 415 Northwest 5th Street is a permitted use at this location. That is what was included in Mr. Box's letter to the neighbors when the applicant withdrew the SPUD application. They said, well, this is not necessary because a determination has been made that this use is permitted at this location by the staff. And again, in his letter addressed to the Board of Adjustment just last week, Mr. Box made that same representation, that the staff had made the determination that a dog park use was permitted at 415 Northwest Fifth Street. That is not correct, but I think that's the reason why you're seeing this response and this level of concern, because that is how it's being characterized by the doghouse, the user of this property at Northwest 15th Street, or Northwest Fifth Street, and their representatives. But as you all know, your review and determination in connection with this appeal is limited to a review of the determination that was actually made by the planning department, which was, what use unit under Oklahoma City zoning ordinances does a dog park fit into? That was the question. The way that Oklahoma City zoning ordinances are designed is that all uses are included under the various use unit categories. So when you're determining where does a particular use go under the use unit categories, the way the ordinance is designed is it has to go somewhere, because the ordinance states that all use units are included in the following use unit categories. So what the staff did when they were presented with the question, where does a dog park go, a public dog park, they determined that it could go within the community recreation restricted use, which although it doesn't reference public dog park, it does include outdoor uses such as tennis courts, basketball courts, other public parks. So that was the determination that was made by the staff, responding only to that inquiry generally. And so what I would ask is that if you are inclined to affirm the determination by the staff that a public dog park could go into the community recreation restricted use unit, that you confirm and make it clear that that interpretation is not intended to apply to a specific address, as is stated in your staff report. That's the only issue that is before the Board of Adjustment today, is this appeal from the determination by the staff, what use unit category does a public dog park fit into? That was the determination that was made. They didn't make any determination with regard to 415 Northwest 5th Street or to any other specific address as they state in their staff report. So if you're inclined to affirm the staff's determination, we would just ask that you clarify and make it plain that that interpretation, that determination, is not intended to apply to a specific address. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Questions, comments from the board? Okay, those are all the folks I have signed up to speak. Wait a minute. David, I'll go ahead.
Real briefly, I agree absolutely with Mr. Work. It has nothing to do with the specific address. It's the global question of whether or not a public dog park is permitted under that use unit, irregardless of a specific address. What we're asking you to do is to affirm globally that that use unit is permitted under, or excuse me, that use is permitted under that use unit, subject to all of the things that we have to also get approved by the DDRC, fencing, the turf, all of those things, and that it is, in staff's determination, a public dog park. So I agree with Mr. Work. We're not here about our address. We're here about that global question, which has historically been the way staff viewed it. We would ask you to deny the appeal and affirm the way that staff has historically viewed it.
Okay. Mr. Dale, come on back up.
Okay, first of all, let me just say this. This problem you're faced with is not quite what's been outlined by either gentleman. This is one problem you have with lawyers I've found. Okay, first of all, let me just say this. the city staff, and this is what brought me into this thing, the city staff, in fact, the lady is right here, has told me unequivocally that in other words, the way things are right now is the city staff is approaching the problem. The city staff is evidently interpreting the statement from zoning exactly the way Mr. Box did in his letter to you. So they're allowing the applicant to proceed with getting a fence permit and going through urban design. Neither one of those outfits are allowed to consider issues of, is this a proper thing to be doing in this particular location, which means that they will be granted the permit and they will be doing this forever. So the thing is, the only avenue that we have at this point is you guys. And I was given that information by Mr. Barker, who is the person from the legal office that stays with the Downtown Design Review, that you're it. So basically what's happened is not only was Mr. Box, maybe by some statement she made that she didn't make public, Mr. Box, because then you saw in the letter, he assumes that they can just do what they're doing right now and just keep doing it. The city staff is proceeding as though he can do what he's doing, because when they get that fence permit and the other thing, they can do this forever, and there's nothing we can do about it. That's what I've been told by the legal department of your own city. So basically, the only recourse we have is right here. And basically, what happens is we're wanting you to, in this case, you got to remember that the city staff does not have to report to us any decision they make or who made it. We just have to guess. This is the only piece of document we had. So we're asking you to really, so when you say, does this thing have a right to go, first of all, there is nothing in the ordinance that with that if 850.4 that says you can have a public dog park in there, or what the nature of that public dog park is, or how you define a public dog park. It's completely unclear and up to interpretation. So we have a law that is vague in the extreme, and nobody seems to really know what they're doing. Unfortunately, for us, it seems the city has an incentive to avoid liability from Mr. Box, and we're getting thrown under the bus. So all legal twitting aside, the real situation here is to consider yourselves. Is this a place to put that? Should the city have made a stronger statement to Mr. Box and to its own staff so that they're not proceeding as though everything is hunky-dory?
Okay. This will be the last call. David, you got anything else you want to say?
What he asked you is absolutely outside your purview. To make a determination as to whether or not the use is appropriate at this address is not what this appeal is. It's not what becomes before the board.
Okay. Kelly, anything else you need to add? Yes. Okay, then we're done. Do we have questions from the board?
I've got a few.
Okay.
And first, I want to start with the applicant. I do agree that what we're here today to review is the decision that was made by staff, and we're limited to just that. That being said, the statement was made earlier that we don't list every single use. It's not an exhaustive list, and I agree with that. But what is understood is that every use we have has to fit in one of these use codes. Has anyone on your team or in your group of protesters identified an alternative use that you would say would be more appropriate than the one that staff has offered up? Because by definition, the way that I interpret this, staff could not have made the wrong decision unless there was an alternative use that was better for a dog park to fit into. Has anybody come up with what that alternative use would be? Because it has to go somewhere.
I think the verbal response was no.
I don't think any of us here disagree that a public dog park, if it's got to fall under a use unit, goes under that one. What our concern is, we have many concerns, but one of our concerns, one of the ones that you do have the power to address, is to amend the recommendation Mr. Welch gave to Mr. Box. If you want to say that's the use unit, if you want to go through all the bells and whistles of converting a private business into a public dog park, which he admits are legion, then do it. But until such time as he gets his CAs, he gets his fencing permit, he takes care of the turf, the egress and ingress problems, the building problems, the zoning issues, the fact that they'll have to get another address for the park, right? Can't have the same address for the building and the park. We've got a whole list of things. Are they going to continue operating like this is a public dog park? That this use unit is allowed as is right now? And that is what we're asking you. Stipulate that the advice she gave him was generic, had nothing to do with this building. Close down the operation that they're doing as it is right now. Stop the barking dogs. And if they can pass all the hurdles, bureaucratic and otherwise, through the DDRC and the Planning Commission, through review, then what else can we do, right? They've done everything the right way and by code.
Okay. Okay, one last call.
Here's a problem we have here in a nutshell. It seems like we have a real tangle here. I have been advised by city staff that there is no process in which to adjudicate the issue of, can this dog park, is it to the advantage of the city to have that dog park in that specific place? And I was told that the only outfit we could go to that could adjudicate that is you guys. Now, so basically, at this point, we're in a situation, and which seems like a rather peculiar situation to me, you can do all the legal speak you want, is that we have something that is creating a public nuisance, that is reducing property values, that is creating a real problem here. And by the way, you do have a right to review ordinances. Maybe what we should do is get a continuance and revise our request to say that we're requesting for you to actually, for example, take public dog park. It doesn't define what a public dog park is. It doesn't define what's public and what's private. It's not defined anywhere in the ordinance. Mr. Bach says, well, they're going to be, by doing this little finagling they're doing, they got a private business that's going to work as a public dog park. Well, prove that he isn't. There is no specification. So we have such a law that's so vague. In other words, if we could make the argument that, look, you're not running a public dog park, you're running a private business. And that's not what that zoning thing you're trying to fit into says. There's nothing in the ordinance that I can read that specifies how do I define what's a public dog park and what's a private one. You just have to come up with your own mind. So the question is, who is going to litigate, for example, whether that's a public or a private dog park that they're moving in there? When I've asked Mr. Barker, he says, well, that's nobody. So that seems kind of strange. I mean, so here we have a vague law, and when we have a vague law, a vague ordinance in this case, that's what you have the Board of Adjustment for, to look at a vague law and make a decision. That's something you have city staff for, to make a decision. The law is vague. It doesn't define how we define what is a public dog park. Clearly, they're not, in my view, operating a public dog park. They're operating a private business, which is specifically prohibited in the zoning. Now, who's going to adjudicate that? If you guys don't, evidently nobody will. So they just proceed as though it's been defined. So what we have here is a city has implicitly made a decision that's not only interpreted by Mr. Box, that goes far beyond that little sentence you got there, that's made them think they can proceed, that they do in fact running their business, which is a private business, can be classified as a public dog park. Where did they get the evidence for that? Talk about evidence, huh? Did they just make it up? I mean, let's face it, the real problem here isn't what kind of fence they put around this thing. The real problem here is it's reducing property values by millions of dollars. If the city makes a habit of doing this, we're not going to have much of a city. This is going to set an awful precedent. So the thing is, are you going to allow this tort to continue forever? I mean, for example, you've got to realize that the city does not have to report to the public what they're deciding and what they're doing, who's deciding it, and who they've talked to. Mr. Box probably has more connections with the city than I've got, I would think, since he appears here every other day. So he probably can read their mind and they can read his, and no telling what they've told him or decided. So we're in an awkward position so basically what I'm saying is the cities should have made a pronouncement in this issue, given all of the litigation we've had that they did not make. She should have made a more specific pronouncement. Now, you have a right to amend her pronouncement. It says that in your ordinance that covers you. You can take what she said and say, well, she should have said something a little more specific, and I think you've certainly got grounds to do that. Because either that or you tell me, or someone tell me, because obviously if something is happening here that shouldn't be happening, in other words, a private business is being called a public business to fit in a slot, and nobody's making a decision, well, how did we figure that out? Who's supposed to do this? Who is supposed to determine in that ordinance that's in there for the public, that this is something for the public purpose? In other words, that this is serving the public in the area. Evidently, no one's going to litigate this. How could it possibly, when you look at 850.4, it says that this public thing you're doing, a basketball court or whatever, must be serving the surrounding area. Now, define that. What is the surrounding area? Is the area protest, which is virtually unanimously against this thing, the surrounding area? I mean, who litigates it? Who decides that? It's not in the ordinance. We've got an ordinance that's so unclear and so vague on everything of what is a public park. First of all, there's nothing in the ordinance that even says this, that even defines what a public park has to be or what you call a public park. Because in other words, if you have a private park that isn't a public park, you have a slot to go in, namely the one where you're not allowed to have your dogs barking outdoors. So they do have a slot to go in. The question is if they can go in a different slot. They're saying they can. Well, based on what? There is no based on anything. I mean, you've put your citizens in a situation if things are so vague and so undetermined, and it's not clear what the process is to get to justice.
Okay, now I think we're finished. Does anybody on the board have a question or a comment?
Can we hear from staff?
Sure.
I guess the big question that I have is when it pertains to the decisions that were made. And so can I get clarification on whether it was just a decision that the dog park falls under this use code of 8250.4 and that's it? Or is there a separate decision that was made after that, which is also that the current configuration is applicable as a public dog park?
Sarah Welch, Planning Department. The decision made was twofold. It was number one, what use unit is a dog park? And number two, is that use allowed in the downtown business district, the DBD? There has not been a decision from staff that how they're operating is the community recreation use unit. That would have to be established. A change of use permit would be needed. And they'll have to go through all the any license and downtown design review processes to establish the use.
And that is when it will be determined whether or not the current configuration and setup can meet that use standard.
Just one moment. My colleague is wanting to clarify, are you under the assumption that the Downtown Design Review Committee would be the ones to authorize the use?
No, not necessarily. Regardless of if it can be done administratively or done through some other body, my question is, to the point that was brought up, the decision specifically as it pertains to whether or not that particular location can meet that use, that process.
That has not been determined.
Okay, and when will that process be determined?
That would be determined, in my opinion, through the building permit process. I mean,
so development services would review it and then make a determination on whether or
on a
not.
change of use, yes.
And I'm assuming at that point they'll give recommendations as far as access so that the public can access it and be able to meet those requirements.
Correct, yes.
So up to this point, so what I'm hearing is that if this does not qualify as, in its current condition, qualify as a public park, we have a private business operating against its intended use, or what it's allowed to operate as at that location?
There are three uses that we've discussed on this site. One is allowed in the DBD, that allows the indoor kennel. One that's not allowed has outdoor runs. And then the third one, which was the subject of this inquiry, is can it be community recreation, a public dog park? In my opinion, they have yet to establish the public dog park use.
So it's not the indoor kennel part of the business that is in violation, it's the outside.
It's the outdoor dog run.
Is there not a way to
Associated
put a
with a
moratorium on that use and pending all the various licenses?
I'm looking towards our attorneys. I don't think it would be within this board's purview to put a moratorium on a zoning case or a zoning use unit, but I would defer to my attorneys.
I mean, I agree that we are one question before us, but at the same time, we're allowing a business to operate illegally partially during this time, it seems like.
Okay, I don't think any of our votes have to do with is 415 Northwest Fifth operating legally or illegal.
No, I agree. I agree as to what our vote is, but I'm trying to address the concerns of the applicants here that we continue to have this outdoor portion being used in violation of what the current license is.
Well, I think that's
in place.
code enforcement.
So,
Yeah.
I just want to ask a really quick question, because my understanding is that we are here to affirm, reverse, or modify what you guys have already determined. Is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions, comments from the board? Okay. Are we ready for a motion?
I just have a question for David. For your client, what are your plans in terms, so if I want to make sure I don't misinterpret what you're saying, I'm under the impression that you all are planning to make modifications to the site to meet this use of being a public park?
That's
public
correct.
dog park?
We're going to have to go through permitting. We've already been told we have to go through DDRC, a public hearing on the turf question. And so whatever permitting staff tells us we have to do to meet the definition of a public dog park is what we will have to do to be properly permitted. So yes, this determination is just, this use unit is a dog park. Staff will then tell us, to be a public dog park, here's all the things you have to do to meet our requirements. That's what we will do.
is that outdoor space still currently being used from day to day?
It is. I mean, when they file the appeal, there's a stay issued. The stay keeps the status quo as is until there's a determination. We have been working with staff and understand that we're going to have to get them materials for the turf, likely go to a public hearing. We have to present them materials for the fencing materials. So it's a lengthy process to become compliant with whatever it is staff tells us a public dog park is.
Is an alternative solution to cease operations as to that outdoor portion pending actually getting all those qualifications?
So we'll talk to staff. That is wildly outside the purview of what the vote is here today. I mean, we're happy to talk to staff. If staff believes that we are in violation today, they of course have the ability to issue a citation immediately.
Well, I don't think that's outside of the purview for today, because one of the decisions that the applicant is challenging is the decision that staff has made a decision that this dog park can privately owned dog park can operate under the zoning under this use code. So that's one of those items, which is why I asked staff if it was just the use generally, or if it was the use as well as a decision that this meets that use.
They haven't made that decision. The only inquiry before you is whether or not globally a dog park, public, is permitted under that use unit, irregardless of what happens at 415 Northwest 5th or anywhere else in this city. That's the question.
So I understand that, but where are you guys receiving the authority to operate as you are currently?
Well, I don't know. We haven't been cited.
So the applicant assumes that you're receiving that authority from staff, which is another thing that they're asking relief from, is that staff is making the decision that they're allowing them to operate that, which brings it into the purview of this board.
So the reality, well, no, that is absolutely not within the purview of the board as to current operations on site. The only thing that they filed an appeal on is whether or not staff was wrong in their decision that a public dog park fits under this.
It's, the nature of the appeal document that I have before me says, Sarah Welch of the City Zoning Department made a decision that the dog park at 415 Northwest Fifth Street would qualify as a privately owned public dog park under the current zoning. So
That's Mr. Dowell's own, look at the staff report. This is Mr. Dowell's words.
no, I understand that, but in his application, he's required to outline the nature of his appeal because that's what we're limited to. We can't review anything outside of that appeal. So anything that he wants us to review that could possibly be overturned, he'd have to state here. And what I'm simply saying is that he's alleged all of those things here that he wants us to review as far as a basis to modify or to turn this out.
He can allege whatever he wants, and I'll defer to your city's to the attorney's office. But the only thing that is properly before you, regardless of his allegations, is whether or not a public dog park fits under that use unit. It doesn't matter what he alleges. What is before you, what the code authorizes, is an appeal of the determination of the administrative official. The determination that's here before you is a dog park fits into this zoning category. Period, end of story. All the other grievances, all the other allegations, perhaps we get cited tomorrow by code enforcement because the manner in which it's operating is not a public dog park. We will have to work through, staff and code compliance to get there to be considered public under what they believe it is. But I would like the city attorney's office, I don't know if Rita or Stephen, to confirm nothing about the current operation, nothing about what we're doing is subject to review today.
And so if council will weigh in on it, I guess my question condensed down would be, what constitutes the notice of appeal? Is it not all of everything that they submit? Because it states that that's what we review as the items contained in the notice of appeal.
It's everything that was submitted by the appealing party. Look at your attachment nature of appeal. That first paragraph says, Sarah Welch of the City Zoning Department made a decision that the dog park at 415 Northwest Fifth Street would qualify as a privately owned public dog park under current zoning. And then it cites 8250.4, the allowed uses under current zoning of the area in question. And then look at the email that's in your packet from Sarah Welch. And what it says, we've reviewed your inquiry. We can confirm that this use unit could be applied to a public dog park. So that is a decision that you have to make.
Could you say that one more time? I'm sorry.
No.
Well, I mean, I think it's important, because what the staff report says is, appeal of Richard Dowell of the decision of an administrative official regarding interpretation of use unit 8250.4, community recreation restricted. There's no mention of an address. There's no mention of current operation at that address. It's strictly, does a public dog park fit under that use unit?
And I believe in the email, there was never mention of an address.
Right.
So it had to do with, would this apply or could it apply? And that's what the board has to decide in response to Mr. Dowell's appeal. His question turns on that, if that's what you determine, the would and the could.
So are we supposed to look outside of what they're asking for in the application?
No, you are to look at the four corners of the document that you've been presented. His question asked, would this,
And I know that every time we've talked about a dog park in a zoning application, the use unit's always been 8250.4, or even a dog daycare. So the use applies to the dog daycare or a outdoor dog park.
So yes, so you would look, look at the email that's Exhibit A, also look at the nature of appeal that was filed, and make your determination based on the question asked and what staff said in the email that is the subject of this appeal.
So when I review that, the way that I interpret this is that there's one issue, which is if it's the appropriate use unit, and then there's a separate issue, which is the determination that's been made. Regardless of what's being said here now, I'm talking about specifically what is in the application. And I guess, I don't know if it's appropriate to get clarification from the applicant as far as what was intended by this, but that sure seems to be.
So the thing that is before you are those two things, actually, the email itself, which is Exhibit A, and then attachment nature of appeal, which describes the appeal from Exhibit A, the email. So if you compare those two, if you determine that they are the same, you have a decision to make. If you determine that one says what use unit could be applied and what use unit was applied, then you have a decision to make. Either way, you have a decision to make.
Okay, we need more
Mr.
lawyers. Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. If you don't mind one more hopping in here. Stephen Barker, Municipal Counselor's Office, to kind of try and help follow up, clarify as far as what's at question, or at least in my opinion, what's in question today. I think the nature of appeal document that Rita's referencing from the appellant, this address, the 415 Northwest 5th, sure, that's the property owner, but I think more generally, if you look at that as made the decision that a dog park, not the dog park, I think the applicant is just generally referring to this property and the way it's currently operating as a dog park. Whether or not that's operating lawfully or not, it's a code enforcement issue, but I think generally speaking, the appellant is referring to this facility as a dog park. Whether that, I'm taking that address to mean the zoning district, right? So the downtown, the DBD, not just this specific address. Again, kind of that broader, the DBD. So one, is a dog park, should that fit in the 8250.4 use unit classification? And two, as Ms. Welch in her testimony stated, is that use unit authorized or permitted in the code in the DBD zoning district? That's how I would confine it. Ms. Talley, would you agree with that? I mean, I think that's effectively what we're getting at. Now, whether or not, again, you've heard a lot of things, whether or not that's a good idea or whether or not it's good for business, there's a lot of other things, but I think generally speaking, what's been appealed is Ms. Welch right that a dog park fits into 8250.4? And secondly, is 8250.4 a permitted use in the DBD where 415 Northwest 5th Street is zoned, right?
And that does take it further, that does take it a little bit further, and that is something that you have to consider. But please be sure that as you consider it, you're considering all of the information that you've been provided. But the question, of course, which is, what is that exhibit, the nature of appeal that's on your screen, and also the thing that was appealed from, which is Exhibit A. So comparing those two things, look at what was appealed from, look at what was said, and then whatever determination you make is the appropriate one.
And so the record's clear, when you're saying Exhibit A, you're referring to my December 29th, 2023 letter.
I am referring to, yes, Thursday, September 21st, 2023. Thank you.
And that's the email from Sarah.
And that is Exhibit A.
That's what was appealed from.
Yes.
Right. Okay. Anything else from the board?
One quick thing. So 8250.4 does not list what community recreational items are, does it? Specifically, does it say dog parks, swimming pools?
It doesn't say
pool
dog
halls,
park.
None of that stuff, right?
So, It says typical uses.
Thank you, and I read through it as well,
Yeah.
too. So I'm
Okay. All right, are we ready for a motion? I am, but I can't make a motion.
and y'all can go from there. I would like to motion that we deny case number 15489, given the fact of staff's report that we heard earlier today, based upon that. And only because we are here to make a determination of what that report revealed. So that's
Your motion is to deny the appeal and uphold the city's
yes, it is.
decision. Okay. To deny the appeal. Do we have a second?
Second.
Got a motion and a second. So if you vote yes, you're voting to side with the city staff interpretation and deny the appeal. Did I say that right? Yes. Pretty close? Yeah. Okay. Motion and a second. Cast your votes. I lost my voting panel.
Payne didn't come up.
Oh.
I'm not an attorney.
All right, there you go. Cast your votes. Okay, the appeal's denied. All right, we deferred number 11. Anybody have additional items? No board committees. Board members have comments? Municipal counselor? Citizens to be heard? All right, nobody stepped up. We're ready to adjourn.